The rain came down warm that night, the way it only does in July, and Wren Callahan took the stranger's photograph without asking. She would think about that later, how a single frame she pressed in the dark, of a man she had never met, would by morning be spread across every newspaper in the city, on the front page of papers she couldn't afford, and papers she'd never heard of, folded under the arms of strangers on every corner. But in the moment there was only the rain, and the amber wash of a streetlight, and a man standing perfectly still in the middle of a downpour as though he had forgotten how to move. She had ducked under the awning of a shuttered flower shop to wait out the worst of it. The camera was already in her hands. It was always in her hands. The old Leica, with the cracked leather that had been her father's, the strap gone soft as a worn dollar. She lifted it out of habit more than intention. Through the viewfinder the world went quiet and rectangular and true. And there he was. He stood at the mouth of an alley across the street, in front of a narrow brick building with a dark green door. Water ran off the ends of his hair and down the collar of a coat that had cost more than she made in a season, though she didn't know that yet. He wasn't hunched against the weather. He wasn't hurrying. He was looking up at a lit window on the 3rd floor with an expression she had no word for, something between hunger and apology. A man reading a letter he already knew by heart. She pressed the shutter. The soft mechanical click was swallowed by the rain. She wound the film and pressed it again, and then she lowered the camera, suddenly embarrassed, as if she'd read something over his shoulder. Across the street the man let out a breath she could see, a small cloud in the streetlight, and touched 2 fingers to his lips and then to the brick beside the green door. Then he turned up his collar and walked away into the water, and the window on the 3rd floor went dark, and the whole thing was over. "You take pictures of sad men in the rain now," a voice said behind her. Wren startled. Marisol stood in the doorway of the print shop next door, an umbrella in one hand and a paper cup of tea in the other, her reading glasses shoved up into grey hair that had come loose from its knot. She had a way of appearing exactly where she was least expected, and a way of looking at Wren over the top of those glasses that made grown men confess to things. "He wasn't sad," Wren said, though she wasn't sure. "He was." She stopped. "I don't know what he was." "That's a yes." Marisol held out the tea. "Come inside before you drown. I'm not filing a report because you stood under an awning being an artist." Wren took the tea. It was too sweet, the way Marisol made it, and warm through the thin cardboard, and she wrapped both hands around it and followed her in. The print shop smelled the way it always did, of hot toner and cut paper, and the faint chemical sweetness of the developing room in the back that nobody used anymore but Wren. The overhead light buzzed. Somewhere the big copier ticked as it cooled. It was nearly 11, and they should both have been home an hour ago, but Marisol owned the place, and Wren all but lived in it, and neither of them had anywhere they were in a hurry to be. "You're soaked through," Marisol said, dropping into the chair behind the counter with the groan of a woman who had been on her feet since 6. "Go develop your Rain Man before you catch something, and cost me a week." It's July. Nobody catches anything in July. I catch impatience. Marisol waved a hand at the back room. "Go." Wren went. She liked the dark room the way some people like church, for the quiet and the ritual, and the sense that here, at least, cause and effect still held. Out in the world you could do everything right and lose anyway. In here, you followed the steps and an image came up out of nothing. Faithful. Every time. She hung her wet jacket on the hook, tied on the apron stiff with old fixer, and worked in the red gloom with her sleeves shoved to the elbows, the rain drumming on the roof 3 stories up and coming down the drainpipe outside the wall in a long, steady rush. She almost didn't print the man. She had a roll's worth of the evening on the strip, a fruit vendor closing his stall, a couple sharing one raincoat, a pigeon fluffed on a ledge like a disgruntled landlord. She printed those first, small, out of a kind of shyness. But she kept coming back to the frame of him, and finally she slid it into the enlarger and opened the lens and let the light fall. He came up slowly in the developer tray, the way faces do. First the dark of the coat, then the pale of the water on the pavement, then the face itself. And she stood there with the tongs in her hand and forgot to breathe. She had caught it. Whatever it was. The whole of it, the tilt of his head, the 2 fingers lifted, the lit window, the ache. It was the best thing she had ever made, and she'd made it of a man whose name she didn't know in the 90 seconds before he walked out of her life. Marisol, she called, and her voice cracked strangely. Come look. Marisol came, tea in hand, and stood in the doorway where the red light caught her glasses. She looked at the wet print pegged to the line for a long moment. Well, she said at last, that's not a photograph. That's an accusation. Is that bad? It's the opposite of bad. Marisol took a slow sip. It's the kind of thing that gets a person noticed, which, in my experience, is a mixed blessing at best. She turned to go, then paused. Your father would have stood here another hour looking at it, saying nothing, and then he'd have told you it was fine. It's better than fine, Ren. Don't sell it for a sandwich. Then she was gone, and the tap dripped, and the rain came down, and Ren stood alone with the stranger's face rising toward her out of the tray. She should have gone home. Instead, she made 3 more prints, because that was the year she couldn't stop making things. The first summer, without her father, when the apartment they'd shared was too quiet, and the camera was the only part of him she could still hold. He had taught her everything she knew in this room, standing exactly where Marisol had just stood, his big, careful hands guiding hers through the trays. He'd photographed weddings for money and strangers for love, and he'd told her, more than once, that a good picture doesn't take something from a person, it gives them back to themselves. She hoped that was true of the man in the rain. She would find out soon enough that it was, and that it would cost them both more than a sandwich. The one thing she did, before she left, was small and careless, and would change everything. She scanned the best print on the flatbed at the front counter, and emailed it to Dev. Dev Okafor had been her friend since art school, back when they'd both believed a photograph could pay a rent. He'd given up on the believing part, and taken a job on the picture desk at the Ledger, one of the big morning dailies, where he spent his nights choosing which of the world's images would greet the city over its coffee. She sent him the file without a note, the way she sometimes did, just to show him she was still alive, still working, still the person he'd known before either of them learned what things cost. She titled the file Rain Man and hit send, and thought nothing more of it. Then she turned off the lights and locked the shop and went home to the too quiet apartment and slept better than she had in weeks, not knowing why. Her phone woke her at 5:40 in the morning. It was Dev, and he was not calling to say hello. Ren. His voice had the flattened, careful sound of a man standing very still on ice. Ren, are you awake? You need to be awake for this. She sat up. Grey summer light came through the curtains. The rain had stopped in the night and left the world washed and dripping, and a bird was going through its whole repertoire on the fire escape. Dev, it's not even 6. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Something's, he laughed, a short disbelieving sound. Did you go outside yet? Have you looked at a newsstand? I've looked at the inside of my eyelids. Dev, you're scaring me. You're Rain Man. A pause, and she could hear him swallow. Ren, I have to tell you something, and you have to not be angry with me until I finish. I showed the picture to my editor last night, just to show her. It's the best thing to come across my desk in a year, and I wanted her to see what my friend can do. Another pause. She didn't ask me who was in it. I swear to you, neither of us knew. We just ran it. Above the fold. A city in the rain, summer photo essay, that kind of thing. It was a slow night. Ren was already on her feet, already reaching for yesterday's jeans, the phone hot against her ear. Okay, that's... Dev, that's amazing. Why do you sound like you're at a funeral? Because at 4 this morning somebody recognized him. Dev's voice dropped. Ren, The man in your photograph. The man standing in the rain looking up at that window like his whole life was on the other side of the glass. He breathed out. That's Julian Thorne. The name landed and rolled and meant nothing. Who? Julian Thorne. Thorne Media. As in, Wren, he owns newspapers. He owns 3 of the papers, currently carrying your photograph of him standing outside a building he has never once, in 15 years of the most photographed life in this city, been seen going into or coming out of. Dev laughed again, high and wild. He's the most private man in America. There are maybe 4 candid pictures of him in existence, and they're all of him getting into a car. And you caught him in the rain, touching a wall, with a face on him like, Wren, the whole city is looking at it right now. Every paper picked it up overnight. Every one. Yours ran first. Wren sat back down on the edge of the bed. The bird on the fire escape sang on. Out the window, 3 floors down, she could hear the ordinary sounds of the street waking. A shutter rolling up, a delivery truck, someone's radio, and it seemed impossible that any of it was still ordinary. Dev, she said carefully, tell me I didn't do something terrible. I don't know what you did. His voice gentled. But I know it's already done. It's on 100,000 doorsteps. There's no calling it back. He was quiet a moment. There's something else. His people called the Ledger at 4:30 this morning. Not lawyers. Not yet. His office. They wanted to know one thing. She heard him wet his lips. They wanted to know who took it. The bird stopped singing. What did you tell them? Wren whispered. Nothing, I swear. Nothing. I said I'd have to check. But Wren, Dev's voice was very kind now, and that frightened her more than anything. The file had your name on the metadata. It always does. You built the preset yourself. Callahan, comma, Wren. It's baked into every photo you've ever sent me. They didn't need me to tell them anything. Wren pulled the curtain aside. The street below was as it always was, wet, gleefy, steaming faintly in the early sun, the plane trees dropping their last raindrops on the parked cars. A woman walked a small dog. A man read a newspaper on the stoop across the way, and Wren could not tell from this distance what was on the front of it, and did not need to. So what do I do? She said. I don't know, Dev said. But I'd get dressed. And Wren, the picture is beautiful. Whatever happens. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever run. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I don't know which. She got dressed. She didn't remember choosing the clothes. She went down the stairs and out into the washed morning, and the air smelled of wet stone and cut grass, and the sweet rot of the flowers the storm had knocked off the trees, and she walked the 4 blocks to the newsstand on the corner of Ash and Main, with her heart going like a trapped bird. It was worse than Dev had said, and better, and both at once. The stand was a wall of her. The ledger, of course, top left, her photograph filling the space above the fold, the man in the rain reaching for the brick with his face turned up to the light. But beside it, the Courier had run it. And the Tribune. And the tabloid whose name she wouldn't say in front of her father, the one that had blown the image up huge and slapped a headline across it in letters 4 inches tall. What is Julian Thorne praying for? And under that, smaller Billionaire's secret midnight vigil. Who lives behind the green door? Hey. The man in the stand leaned out, a compact fellow with a toothpick and a summer's worth of sunburn. You want one, or you want to stand there memorizing it for free? Aye, Wren's mouth was dry. The photograph. On the front. Do you? Is it really everywhere? Sweetheart, I've been selling papers 30 years. I've never had a morning like this one. Sold out of the Ledger by 6. People are buying 3 at a time. My cousin over on Vine's the same. He tapped the tabloid with a blunt finger. This one, the big Thorne fella. Nobody can figure who he was mooning at. He's a cold fish, that one. All money and no face, and here he is looking like his heart fell out of his coat. He shook his head with enormous satisfaction. Whoever took that is going to be rich or sorry. Maybe both. You want one or not? Both, Wren said faintly, and didn't know if she meant papers or fates. She bought the ledger. She couldn't look at the tabloid. She held the ledger against her chest, over her heart, the way you'd hold a secret or a wound, and she walked back toward the shop, through the bright wet morning with the whole city, unknowing, carrying her picture past her on every side. Marisol was already at the counter when Wren pushed through the door, the bell jangling. She had a paper spread in front of her, and her glasses down on her nose, and a face Wren couldn't read. "So," Marisol said, without looking up. "You sold it for a sandwich after all." "I didn't sell it. I sent it to Dev, like I always." Wren set the ledger down on the counter with a hand that shook. "Marisol, I didn't know who he was. I still don't. Really, He was standing there in the rain, and it was the truest thing I'd seen in a year, and I know." Marisol reached across the counter and covered Wren's shaking hand with her own dry, warm one, and held it still. "I know exactly what you did. You gave a man back to himself." She looked up then, over the glasses, and her eyes behind them were not amused at all. "The trouble, Mija, is that some men have spent a great deal of money making sure nobody could ever do that to them. And now the whole city has seen his face doing a thing he never meant a soul to see." She squeezed Wren's hand once and let go. "He's going to want to know why." The phone on the shop wall rang. Both of them looked at it. It was an old phone, mustard-colored, with a rotary dial, and it almost never rang before the shop opened. The ringing filled the small space and bounced off the copiers and the racks of cardstock. Wren's mouth had gone to sand. It could be anyone, she said. A customer. A wrong number. At 6:15. Marisol didn't move to answer it. Certainly, customers famously call at 6:15 desperate for a laminating quote. The phone rang again. And again. "Are you going to stand there letting it ring in my shop, or are you going to find out how the rest of your life starts?" Wren crossed to the phone. Her hand hovered over it through one more ring. She could still, in that second, feel the whole of her old life balanced on the little mustard receiver. The quiet apartment and the dark room and the anonymous safe smallness of being no one. And then she lifted it, because she had never in her life been able to leave a thing unanswered. "Print and copy," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "This is Wren." There was a silence on the line. Not an empty silence, a listening one. She could hear, behind it, the hush of a large room, and very faintly, so faintly she might have imagined it, the sound of rain against a window somewhere high above the city. Though the rain had stopped hours ago, and the morning outside her own window was full of sun. "Wren Callahan," a man said. She knew the voice before she knew how she knew it. It was low and even and careful. A voice that chose each word the way a man crossing a river chooses each stone. And though she had never heard him speak, though she had watched him in silence across a rain-soaked street for the length of 90 seconds, she was suddenly and completely certain that she was listening to the man from the photograph. "Yes," she said. "You took a picture of me last night. No accusation in it. That was the strange thing, the thing that undid her. No anger at all. Only that terrible evenness. A man holding something very heavy and refusing to let his voice show the weight. In the rain. On Corliss Street. Outside a green door." Wren looked down at the counter, where the ledger lay open to her own image, the man with his fingers lifted to the brick. Across the shop, Marisol had gone very still, watching her, and the copier ticked, and the summer light came slanting gold through the front window and lay across the racks of paper. And everything in the world seemed to be waiting. "Yes," Wren said again, and then, because her father had raised her not to hide from the things she'd made, "I'm the one. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know it would. I never meant for anyone to. I know you didn't." A pause, and in it she heard him breathe, and it was the same breath she'd seen bloom silver in the streetlight, the same held weight. "That is precisely the problem, Miss Callahan. Everyone in this city has now seen a version of me that only one other person has ever been permitted to see. and she is behind that green door, and she does not read newspapers anymore. And this morning her nurse called to ask why my face is on the front step. The evenness thinned, for just a moment, like ice over deep water. I would like to know how you did it. How you saw a thing I have spent 15 years making certain no camera could ever find. Wren's hand tightened on the receiver. I don't know how, she said honestly. I looked. The silence on the line changed. She couldn't have said how. But something in it shifted. The way a room changes when someone in it decides something. There is a car outside your building on Rosewood, Julian Thorne said. The black one. It has been there since 5:50. I would take it as a great kindness if you would come and speak with me before the rest of them find your door, which they will, Miss Callahan, within the hour. I can offer you the one thing this city cannot, which is a room with no photographs in it. A breath. The choice is entirely yours. But I would decide quickly, if I were you. Wren turned and looked out the front window of the shop, past the gold light and the racks of paper, to the street. And there, idling at the curb where no car had been a minute before, long and black, and patient as a held breath, was the car. And leaning against a lamppost 20 feet beyond it. Already, a man with a camera the size of her forearm was scanning the doorways of Rosewood, one by one, coming closer. How do you know where I live? Wren whispered. The same way you knew where to point your camera, Julian Thorne said. I looked. And then, quieter, so quiet she pressed the receiver hard against her ear to catch it, please. Marisol was watching her from behind the counter, and Wren realized she had been holding the receiver against a dead line for several seconds. The man had already gone, the way weather goes, leaving only the changed pressure of the room behind him. She set the mustard receiver back in its cradle. It made a small, final sound. Well, Marisol said. Don't tell me. The car outside is his. He knows where I live. Wren's voice didn't sound like her own. He knows my name, he knows where I live, he knows I sent it to Dev. He knows things it took me 30 years to learn about myself. He owns 3 newspapers. Misha knowing things is the whole of his business. Marisol came around the counter, wiping her hands on the apron she wore even when there was nothing to wipe. She looked out the front window at the long black car idling at the curb, and at the man with the enormous camera drifting nearer along Rosewood, checking the doorways one by one like a man reading spines in a library. Her mouth went thin. That one's not his. That one's the beginning of the flood. He said within the hour. He said within the hour to frighten you into his car. Marisol folded her arms. Which does not mean he was lying. Both can be true. That is the entire trouble with men who choose their words like he does. Every one of them is exactly true, and none of them tells you what he wants. She turned. Do you want to go? No, Wren said. And then, because Marisol only looked at her over the glasses and waited, she pressed the heel of her hand against her breastbone, where the folded ledger had left a crease of newsprint on her shirt, and made herself say the rest. But there's a woman behind that green door who woke up to a stranger's face on her doorstep because of me. And he asked me. Not his lawyers. Him, she swallowed. My father used to say if you make a thing, you answer for it. You don't get to make it and then hide. Your father, Marisol said, also died believing the good ones always come back around, and look what that got him. It came out sharper than she meant it. Wren saw her catch it, saw the flinch of a woman who had loved a man badly, and buried the chance to fix it. Marisol reached out and tucked a wet strand of hair behind Wren's ear, the way she had 100 times, at 100 quieter hours. Go, if you're going. But take this. She pulled a card from the register drawer, a plain business card gone soft at the corners, and pressed it into Wren's hand. On the back, in blue pen, was a phone number. My cousin Teo. Not the newspaper cousin, the lawyer cousin. He does wills and slip and falls, he is not fancy. But he will answer at any hour, and he does not lie to me, because he is afraid of me. Her hand closed around Wren's. If that man puts a single piece of paper in front of you to sign, you say you have a lawyer, and you call Teo, and you sign nothing. Nothing, Do you hear me? He said no lawyers. He said a room with no photographs in it. They always say that. Marisol let her go. Now walk out with your chin up, because that man on the corner is going to take your picture the second you hit the sidewalk, and for the rest of your life it will be the picture of the girl who took the Thorn photograph, so you may as well not be squinting. Ren laughed. A small, cracked, involuntary thing. Entirely wrong for the morning, and it loosened something in her chest, just enough to breathe. She folded the ledger under her arm, image inward, and went to the door. The bell jangled. The morning met her all at once. The whetstone smell of the washed street, the green reek of the storm-fallen leaves gone soft in the gutters, the sun already climbing hot over the rooftops and steaming the puddles to a faint white haze. The man with the camera turned his whole body toward her the way a compass finds north. "Miss Callahan?" he called, already crossing. "You the one who took it?" Miss Callahan. 30 seconds. The shutter was going before he finished the sentence. A rapid mechanical stutter she felt in her teeth. So unlike the single soft click of her father's Leica, that it seemed a different act entirely, a taking where hers had been a giving. "How'd you find him? He pay you? You know who lives behind the door?" She didn't answer. The rear door of the black car opened from inside, as if the car had been watching too, and a man in a grey suit, young, unsmiling, an earpiece coiled at his collar, held it and said, "Low. Miss Callahan, please," and she bent and got in, and the door shut, and the stuttering shutter and the shouted questions dropped away into a padded, cool, upholstered silence, so complete it rang. She had never been inside a car like it. The seats were the color of strong tea and smelled of leather, and something faint and clean beneath it. Cedar, maybe, or Money's idea of cedar. Cold air breathed from vents she couldn't see. Through the tinted glass the city went by underwater green and slow, the newsstands sliding past with her own photograph flagging from every rack, so that she rode across town accompanied by 100 copies of a stranger's private face, and her own name nowhere on any of them, and both of those facts sat in her stomach like stones. The young man in grey sat across from her, facing backward, hands folded. He did not look at her the way the photographer had. He looked at her the way you look at a package that might or might not be ticking. "Is she all right?" Ren said. The woman, behind the door. Something moved across his face and was gone. "Mr. Thorn will speak to you himself," he said, which was not an answer, and he did not offer another the whole ride. The car did not take her to an office tower, which was what she had braced for. Some glass spire with his name on it, and 40 floors of people whose job was to make problems like her disappear. It took her instead through a gate that opened, without anyone appearing to open it, down a cobbled drive under plane trees heavy with summer, to a house. A real house, brick and ivy, old the way almost nothing in the city was old. Set back behind a wall that had kept its secrets so long, the neighbors had probably forgotten there was a house to keep them in. The car stopped. The door opened onto birdsong, and the smell of cut-box hedge warming in the sun, and gravel that crunched underfoot. And Ren stood there, clutching a folded newspaper in her father's out-of-season jacket, feeling every thread of what she was and wasn't. He was waiting in the doorway. In life he was both exactly and nothing like the photograph. Taller, the coat was gone. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves turned back and no tie, and without the rain to soften him, he looked more tired, not less. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't touch. But it was the same face, the same stillness, like a man who had trained himself out of every unnecessary motion until only the necessary ones were left, and then trained himself out of most of those too. Miss Callahan. He didn't offer his hand. She understood, somehow, that it wasn't rudeness, it was that he had learned hands could be photographed. "Thank you for coming. I know it wasn't a small thing to do. You didn't give me much of a reason to feel safe about it." No, his mouth did something that on another man might have started toward a smile, and here only acknowledged the hit. "I didn't." I've found that the people who insist you're safe are usually the ones you should run from. I'd rather you came in clear-eyed. He stepped back to let her pass. Come in. I promised you a room with nothing on the walls. It's the only promise I'm entirely sure I can keep. The house inside was cool and dim and smelled of old wood and lilies from a vast arrangement on a hall table and, under it all, very faintly, of the same clean cedar as the car. He led her down a corridor hung with nothing. She noticed it the way you notice a held breath. Every wall was bare. Not the emptiness of a house not yet moved into. There were faint rectangles in the paint, ghost pale, where frames had hung for years and then been taken down, so that the whole hallway was a record of pictures somebody had decided to stop looking at. He caught her seeing it. You're wondering about the marks, he said. I'm a photographer. I notice where the pictures used to be. They're the only honest thing in the house, he said, and opened a door. The room beyond was a study, book-lined, with tall windows giving onto the green tangle of a walled garden, and, as promised, not one photograph, not one framed face, nothing on the walls but shelves and light. A tray waited on a low table, a pot of coffee, 2 cups, a plate of pastries no one was going to eat. It was the tray of a man who had been told this was how you made a person comfortable and had never in his life needed it done for him. Sit, he said. Please. You've had a worse morning than you deserved. She didn't sit. She stood by the window with the ledger still against her chest and looked at him, this man the whole city was talking about, in a room he had emptied of every eye but hers, and she made herself ask the thing she'd come to ask. Who is she? The woman behind the green door. You said only one person had ever seen. That look. You said her nurse called. Her voice caught, and she pushed through it. I put her on 100,000 doorsteps this morning, and I don't even know her name. I'd like to know whose life I broke into. For a long moment he said nothing. Outside a wood pigeon called, and was answered. He crossed to the window and stood a careful distance from her, looking out at the garden, at a rose that had thrown itself over an old wall and gone half wild, and when he spoke it, was to the glass. Her name is Eleanor, he said. She has been on Corliss Street for 11 years, in a building I own through 4 other names, so that no one could ever trace it to me. Cared for by people I pay very well never to speak, in the only rooms in this city where she has never once been afraid. He turned the coffee cup a quarter turn on its saucer, without pouring it, the small stilled motion of a man giving his hands something to do. She is not my wife. She is not a lover, or a mistress, or whatever the tabloid downstairs on my own front step has decided by now. She raised me, when there was no one else who would. The evenness thinned again, that ice over deep water. And she is not well, Miss Callahan, in the way that means she does not always know what year it is, and the one mercy of that illness has been that she has been spared, for 11 years, the knowledge that anyone was watching. This morning her nurse held up a newspaper, and she saw my face on it, in the rain, and she asked. He stopped. His jaw worked once. She asked if I was locked out, if I couldn't get in, because that is what the picture looks like to someone who loves you. It looks like you couldn't get home. The room was very quiet. Wren found she had pressed her hand flat to the cold window pane, without deciding to. I go on the 12th of every month, he said. In the rain, if it rains. I stand outside, because if I go in, and she is having a bad day, she is frightened by the stranger in her sitting room, and it is kinder to stand under her window where she cannot see me, and know that the light is on and someone good is with her. He set the cup down. I have arranged my entire life so that no one would ever see me do that, and last night, a woman I have never met stood under a flower shop awning and saw the one thing I have never let anyone see, and this morning she gave it to the world. I didn't give it to the world, Wren said, and her voice shook now with something that was not only fear. I gave it to one friend, to show him I was still, that I still made things. I didn't know who you were. I titled the file Rain Man, and I hit send at midnight because I was proud of it. And I fell asleep proud of it. And I woke up to this. She turned from the window to face him full on. I am more sorry than I know how to say. But don't stand in your empty room and tell me I handed your grandmother to strangers on purpose, because I didn't. And I think a man who chooses his words as carefully as you do already knows that. She'd gone too far. She knew it as it left her mouth, saw the young man in grey materialize in the doorway at some signal she hadn't caught, felt the whole vast machinery of the house tense around the impertinence of her. And Julian Thorne looked at her. Really looked, the way she looked through a viewfinder, as if for the first time all morning he was seeing the actual thing, and not the problem it represented. No, he said slowly. I don't think you did it on purpose. He lifted 2 fingers, a small gesture, and the young man in grey withdrew. Which is a great deal more inconvenient than if you had. A woman who sells my privacy for money is a transaction. I know how to close a transaction. He almost smiled again, and again didn't. A woman who simply saw truly, and told one friend, and slept well. I don't know what to do with you at all, Miss Callahan. You've no idea how rarely I can say that. Whatever might have come next did not come, because the study door opened without a knock, and a woman walked in as though the room had been waiting for her and everyone in it had merely been keeping her seat warm. She was perhaps 50, expensively simple, in a summer dress the color of unsalted butter and shoes that had never touched a wet street, and she carried a tablet in one hand and the whole weather of the outer world in the other. She took in Wren in a single downward glance, the out-of-season jacket, the wet-cuffed jeans, the newspaper crushed to her chest, priced her and dismissed her, all in the time it took to cross the threshold. Julian, she said. The Courrier's running a second edition at noon, and they've got a name. Her name. The glance again, colder. I assume this is her, since you've brought the fire into the house instead of putting it out. She set the tablet down on the coffee tray, hard enough to rattle the cups. Diane Marsh, she said to Wren, without warmth. I run communications for Thorne Media, which this morning means I run damage. Do you have any idea what you've done, or shall I show you the analytics? Diane, Julian said. Just the name, even. Quiet, but the temperature of the room dropped a degree. No, let her see. Diane swiped the tablet awake and turned it toward Wren, and there it was, the photograph, and beneath it a graph climbing like a cliff face, and numbers Wren couldn't pass and didn't need to. 14 million impressions before breakfast. Every outlet in the country. 3 documentary producers, 2 of them with contracts already drafted. And a very persistent person from a magazine offering she checked, precise and cruel. Your Miss Wren Callahan, a great deal of money for the story of how she stalked the most private man in America to his, what did the tabloid call it, his secret midnight vigil. She let the tablet fall dark. So, you can be paid, or you can be sued. And frankly, I don't much care which. But you cannot be both photographed on his front step at noon. So one of you needs to decide what you are, and quickly. I didn't stalk anyone, Wren said. It doesn't matter what you did. Diane's smile was a professional courtesy extended to no one. It matters what it looks like. You of all people should understand that a picture isn't what happened. It's what people decide happened. And right now the picture is a lonely genius billionaire and the girl who hunted him, and that is a story that sells. Miss Callahan, whether it's true or not. She turned to Julian. The lawyers want to file for injunctive relief and go after the metadata trail. It's the clean version. She signs a release confirming she'll make no further use of the image. She takes a settlement. She signs an ender about Corliss Street, and by Friday, she's a footnote. She said it the way you'd read a grocery list. I've had them draft it. It's on your desk. All she has to do is sign. And there it was, the paper Marisol had warned her about, already drafted, already waiting, before Wren had so much as sat down. Her hand went to the soft card in her pocket. She thought of Theo, the lawyer cousin who did wills and slip and falls and answered at any hour. "I have a lawyer," Wren said. Her voice was small, but it held. "I'm not signing anything today." Diane's eyebrows rose a precise, disbelieving degree. "You have a lawyer." "I do. Of course you do." She looked at Julian, and something passed between them that had years in it. A long argument they'd clearly had in other rooms about other fires. "This is why we don't invite them in. You bring one girl in from the rain and give her coffee and a view of the roses, and now she has a lawyer and an opinion, and by tonight she'll have an agent." She gathered her tablet. "Sign her or serve her, Julian, but do it before the noon edition, because after that she's not a person anymore. She's a headline, and headlines don't sign releases." She was already at the door. "The document's on your desk. The car can take her home, or the car can take her to my office, and we do this properly. Her choice." A last look at Wren, and for just a flicker there was something almost like pity in it, which was worse than the contempt. "For your sake, take the money. Whatever you think this is, the truth, the art, the man being decent to you in his nice quiet room, it isn't. In 3 days he'll do exactly what protects Eleanor and the company, in that order, and you'll be a line item. That's not cruelty. It's just what he is. I've watched it for 15 years. And she was gone, the door drifting shut behind her on the smell of lilies and the climbing green light. The silence she left was a different silence. Wren stood in it, holding her father's jacket closed with one hand as if the room had gone cold, though it hadn't, and looked at the man by the window who had not defended her, and had not, she noticed, denied a single word. "Is that true?" she said. What she said. That in 3 days I'm a line item. Julian Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Out in the garden the wood pigeon called again into the hot still morning, and a bee blundered against the window glass and found the open gap at the top, and was gone. "Diane has kept this family and this company standing through things that would have taken either of them apart," he said at last. "She is very rarely wrong about what protects us." He looked at Wren, and for the first time the evenness cracked all the way through, and underneath it she saw not the billionaire, and not the stranger in the rain, but simply a tired man who had run out of walls to stand behind. "She's wrong about one thing, though, and I'd like you to hear me say it, because I don't think anyone will believe me for very much longer." He drew a breath. "I did not bring you here to sign you or serve you. I brought you here because in 15 years you are the only person who has looked at me and seen a man who couldn't get home, instead of a man who owns the street. And I have not yet decided whether that makes you the most dangerous thing that has happened to me, or the only true one." He crossed to the desk, and Wren's stomach dropped, because she thought he was going for the document. But he picked up something else, a single sheet, and stood with it for a moment before he spoke. "There's something you should know before you decide anything," he said, "because Diane doesn't know it, and if she did she would burn this whole thing to the ground by 2 o'clock. He set the paper down where Wren could see it, and slid it toward her across the polished wood. It was a printout of an email, a booking confirmation, a wire transfer, an address on Corliss Street. "Someone paid to know where I go on the 12th of the month. 6 weeks ago. Someone hired a person to stand on that street on a rainy night and photograph me at Eleanor's window. His finger rested on the wire transfer, on a figure with too many zeros. You didn't hunt me, Miss Callahan. You got the picture out first, by accident, with your father's old camera and your one true eye. The whole world had it by morning, before the man who was actually paid to do it could deliver a single private print. Your photograph didn't expose me." He looked up, and the room seemed to tilt. "It warned me. And I need to know who signed that wire before they realize you took their shot for them. Because when they do, you are not going to be safe in that quiet apartment on Rosewood for very long." Outside, faint and far off beyond the wall, a horn sounded on the avenue, and then another, the city going about its enormous, unknowing mourning. And Wren stood in the room with no photographs, looking down at a stranger's name blacked out on a wire transfer, and felt the floor of her old life give way entirely beneath her feet. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the tall windows, the garden hummed with heat, and a bee worked the wild rose along the wall. And Wren stood looking down at the blacked-out name on the wire transfer as though, if she stared hard enough, the ink would thin and give the letters up. "You can't read it either," she said. "The name?" "No." Julian did not move from the desk. "My people recovered the transfer through a bank that had no reason to help me, and every reason to fear me. What they could not recover is the account behind it. It routes through a company that owns nothing in a country that keeps no records, and it was opened 11 days before the payment and closed the morning after. Someone who knew precisely how much of himself to leave on the page, and no more." He turned the sheet a fraction with one finger, squaring it to the edge of the desk. "In my experience, that is not a jealous rival or a bored reporter. That is a man who has read the rules of my company the way you read light." "What rules?" Her mouth was dry. "What does a photograph of you standing in the rain have to do with rules?" "Sit down, Miss Callahan. Please." This time she sat, on the edge of the chair, the folded newspaper still crushed against her ribs like a shield she'd forgotten she was holding. He poured coffee she hadn't asked for and set it in front of her, and the small, ordinary gesture, a rich man doing a servant's task with his own hands, undid a knot in her she hadn't known was pulled tight. "There is a clause in the Charter of Thorn Media," he said. "It is very old and very dull, and it has never once been used. It says that if the chairman is found to be, the language is from another century of unsound governance, the board may vote to remove him and place his shares in trust." He sat across from her at last, folding down into the chair as if his own body were a coat he was tired of wearing. Compromised judgment, a hidden dependency, a secret that could be used to move him. "For 15 years, the one true thing anyone could hold against me has been on Corliss Street behind a green door, and I have kept her there so carefully that even the board believes I have no attachments at all. That is the reputation that has kept me chairman. Cold, unmovable, a man with nothing to lose." His jaw moved. "And this morning the whole city saw me lose it in the rain." Wren set the coffee down without drinking. "So the person who paid, they weren't after the story. They were after the picture. Proof you have a weakness. Proof I have a heart, and where it lives." He said it evenly, but she watched the cost of the evenness travel down the tendons of his forearm to his hand. "One photograph of me at that window, in the right hands, at the right meeting, and I am no longer the man who cannot be moved. I am a man with a wound 11 years deep on a street they can find. They would not even have to make it public. They would only have to let me know they could." He looked at her. "You took that leverage and printed it on 100,000 doorsteps a full day before they could deliver it privately, and now it belongs to everyone. Which means it belongs to no one. Which means for the space of a single morning you have made me safer than I have been in 15 years. And more exposed. Both at once. You have no idea how much I dislike owing that to an accident." "It wasn't." She stopped. "All right. It was an accident. I'm not going to pretend I planned it, because you'd know I was lying, and I get the feeling you're very good at knowing." She pressed her thumbnail into the crease of the newspaper. "But there's something you're not saying. You didn't slide that wire transfer across the desk to tell me I'm safe. You did it because you want something." The corner of his mouth moved, that thing that started toward a smile and stopped. "Marisol was right about you." Wren went very still. "I never told you her name. You told me you sent the file to a friend at the Ledger, and the friend has a name, and the shop where you develop your work has an owner, and the owner has a cousin who does wills and slip and falls." He said it gently, almost with apology, but it landed like cold water down her collar. "I told you this morning. I looked. It took a person I employ 11 minutes. I am telling you not to frighten you, but so that you understand exactly how little time you have before the person who paid for that wire looks too. and finds the same 11 minutes worth of you, and understands what I understood at 4 o'clock this morning. Which is what? She whispered. That you were on that street. He leaned forward, and the tiredness in his face sharpened into something almost like fear, the first uncontrolled thing she had seen in him. Whoever hired that photographer told him a date and a window, the 12th of the month, the 3rd floor, the green door. He would have been on Corliss Street last night, Miss Callahan standing somewhere in that same rain, waiting for me to arrive. And so were you. His voice dropped. I need to see your film. Not the one you printed. The whole roll. Because if there was another man on that street with a camera, watching me watch her, there is a very good chance that you photographed him, without ever knowing he was there. The bee found the gap at the top of the window and blundered out into the light, and Wren felt the whole morning tilt on its edge. She thought of the strip hanging in the darkroom, the fruit vendor, the couple under one raincoat, the pigeon fluffed like a landlord. She had printed them small, out of shyness, and never looked hard at what stood behind them. There were other frames, she said slowly. Before him, the street. I wasn't looking at the backgrounds. I was looking at the light. She lifted her eyes to Julian's. If someone was there, he'd be in them, behind the vendor, under the awning across the way. Her heart began to knock. He'd be in my negatives right now, on a clothespin, in a room I left the key to, under a paint can. Julian was already on his feet. Where? The shop, the dark room, at the back. She stood too fast, and the room swam. Marisol's. On Vernon. I have to. The study door opened, and the young man in grey was there, and he did not wait for permission the way he had before. Sir. His voice was low and clipped, and it had lost its careful blankness. You need to see the noon edition. It's out early. He crossed to the desk and set a tablet down, and Julian bent over it, and Wren, standing, could see the screen upside down. And even upside down she knew her own face when she saw it. Not her photograph. Her face. A picture of her, squinting, mid-stride, coming out of the print shop that very morning. The shudder she'd felt in her teeth, on the sidewalk. The man who'd crossed toward her calling her name. The woman who hunted Julian Thorne said the letters over it, and beneath. In smaller type she had to turn her head to read, obsessed photographer tracked billionaire for weeks, sources say. Weeks, Wren said. The word came out of her like something torn. I didn't even know his name until 6 o'clock this morning. What sources? There are no sources, there's nothing to source, none of that happened. It doesn't have to have happened. Julian's voice had gone flat and terrible and quiet, and he was not looking at her. He was looking at the young man in grey. Cole, where did the courier get the line about weeks? Cole hesitated, and the hesitation was its own answer, and Wren watched something close in Julian's face like a door. Say it, Julian said. The tip came in at 4:10 this morning, Cole said. Anonymous, before the metadata was public. Before anyone outside this company knew her name. He swallowed. It came in with talking points, sir, ready-made. Obsessed. Tracked for weeks. Stalker. Whoever sent it wanted the story to be about her from the first edition. He looked, once, at Wren, and away. It routed through a scrubber, but the scrubber was one of ours. It's a service the communications department uses to place items it doesn't want attributed. The room went so quiet Wren could hear the coffee cooling, the tick of the house settling in the heat, her own blood. Diane, she said. We don't know that, Cole said quickly. We know the tool was hers, Julian said, and now he did look at Wren, and the evenness was gone entirely, burned off like water off a hot stone. Someone in my own house fed your name to the wolves before breakfast, and told them what to call you. Not to protect me, to choose the story. To make certain that when the city looked at that photograph, it would see a lonely great man and the girl who hunted him, and never once ask who paid to know where I would be standing. He set the tablet down with a control so deliberate It was worse than throwing it. They needed a villain who wasn't them. And you walked out of the rain and handed them one. Ren stood in the middle of the beautiful empty room and felt the last of the floor go. "I have to get to my negatives," she said. Her voice didn't shake now. It had gone past shaking to a cold, flat clarity that frightened her more. If Diane, if whoever this is, if they know I was on that street, they know what's on that film. They'll want it. And Marisol is sitting behind that counter right now, with the door unlocked, because it's a Tuesday, and she's expecting the man who brings the cardstock. She was moving before she'd decided to, snatching up the newspaper, her father's jacket half off the chair. "I have to call her. I have to. Cole will drive you." Julian was around the desk. "Not the black car. It's known now, they'll follow it. Take the... No." She turned on him, and the word came out harder than she meant, and she saw it land. "No. I don't know you. I'm sorry. But I don't. I have known you for 1 hour, and in that hour I've learned that your company put my name and a lie on the front of a newspaper, and that you keep a woman in a building under 4 false names, and that you had someone find out everything about my life in 11 minutes and told me about it like it was a kindness." She was breathing hard. "Marisol warned me about the paper on your desk before I ever got in your car. She told me men like you say all the right true things, and every one of them is exactly true, and none of them tells me what you want. So no, I'm not getting in another one of your cars to be driven somewhere by another one of your quiet men in grey suits. I'm going to walk out that gate, and I'm going to my friend and my film. And you're going to let me." For a moment she thought he'd argue, or worse, that he'd smile, that stopped smile, and gently explain how little choice she had. She braced for it. He didn't. "All right," Julian said. Cole made a small involuntary sound of protest, and Julian lifted 2 fingers, and it stopped. "All right," he said again, quieter. And he stepped back from the door, and it cost him something. She could see it cost him. "You're right not to trust me. I would think less of you if you did. But hear one thing before you go, and then the choice is yours. All of it." He reached into his shirt pocket and took out something small and set it on the tray beside the untouched pastries, a plain phone. Cheap, the kind sold at a counter for cash. "That has 1 number in it. Mine. Not the office. Not Diane. Not a lawyer. When you find what's on that film, and you will find something, Miss Callahan, because you are the only person in this entire business who was actually there, you are going to want to give it to someone, and every instinct you have is going to tell you to give it to the police, or the papers, or a lawyer named Teo, who does slip and falls." His eyes held hers. "Give it to none of them yet, because whoever paid that wire has a scrubber inside my company, and a headline about you already running. And the moment that film surfaces in any hands but mine, they will make certain it says, whatever protects them. You of all people know, a picture is not what happened. It's what people decide happened. A breath. Let me be the one thing in your morning that isn't deciding for you. Take the phone. Don't call it if you don't want to. But have it." She looked at the cheap phone on the silver tray, absurd there, next to the pastries no one would eat. Then she picked it up and put it in the pocket of her father's jacket, next to Teo's soft card, one warning against another, and walked out of the room with no photographs in it, and back down the corridor of pale ghosts where the pictures used to be, and out into the hot green blaze of the drive. Alone, the gate opened before she reached it, without anyone appearing to open it, the way it had let her in. She didn't look back at the house. She got out the plain phone as she walked, thumbed it awake, and found she couldn't call Marisol on it. There was truly only 1 number saved, and it wasn't the shop's. So she dug her own phone out of her jeans, the screen already crowded, with missed calls from numbers she didn't know. 3 from Dev, and she called the mustard-colored rotary phone on the wall of the print shop and stood on the cobbles under the plane trees, listening to it ring. It rang 4 times. Marisol never let it ring 4 times. "Come on," Ren said under her breath. "Come on. Come on, pick up, print and copy. Not Marisol. A man. Winded, cheerful, wrong. You want to hold on a sec? Lady who runs the place stepped out front. There's a whole, hey, you selling something? 'Cause there's like 9 reporters out here, and a guy climbed on the mailbox. Who is this? Ren's stomach dropped through the cobbles. Who are you? Why are you answering that phone? Whoa. Easy. I'm the cardstock guy. Reggie. I do the Tuesday delivery. Papers rustled near the receiver. Look, it's a zoo. There's cameras all up and down Vernon. The old girl's out there giving somebody the sharp end of her tongue. You want me to, Reggie. Listen to me. Ren was walking fast now, then not walking, then moving in the flat, quick stride that isn't quite running, because running draws eyes. There's a room at the back of the shop. Behind the curtain, past the big copier, there's a curtain, and then a door with a red bulb over it. Is the door shut? I need you to tell me if the door is shut. The little dark room? Nah. It's... Hang on. She heard him cross the shop, heard the familiar squeak of the curtain ring she'd pushed through 1,000 times, and every one of the sounds was intimate and horribly far away. It's open a crack. Lights off. You want it, oh? Huh? What? She'd stopped again. In the middle of the sidewalk on a street 4 blocks from the shop, in the full white glare of the July noon, and a woman with a stroller had to step around her and gave her a look. What is it? Reggie, what do you see? Somebody's been in here. His voice changed, the cheer draining out of it, and that frightened her more than shouting would have. There's, like, you got a clothesline back here? With the little pins? 'Cause it's empty, and there's stuff on the floor and the, what's this? The trays? They're all, yeah, somebody dumped them. There's water everywhere, and the light table thing's on, and there's a note. The plane trees hissed overhead in a hot gust and dropped the last of the storm's water down the back of her collar, and she didn't feel it. Read it to me, Ren said. It says, Reggie cleared his throat, awkward, a man reading someone else's mail. It says, we have the role. Tell your girl to stop looking, and this stays about a photograph. If she keeps looking, it stops being about a photograph. That's it. No name. Kinda dramatic, if you ask me. You want me to call no, the word came out of her fast and hard. No, don't call anyone, don't touch anything, and Reggie, is Marisol all right? Is she hurt? She's fine. She's out front reading a guy his rights like she's a judge. She's having the time of her. A muffled commotion. The bell over the shop door. Marisol's voice rising unmistakable and furious, somewhere beyond the receiver. And then the phone was wrestled from Reggie's hand and Marisol was there. Breathless. Sharp. Alive. Ren, where are you? Are you with him? I left him. Marisol. Someone's been in the dark room. They took the roll. The whole roll. They left her. I know what they left. I'm looking at it. I sent the cardstock idiot to answer the phone, so I could keep the vultures off the door. Marisol's voice dropped, and under the anger Ren heard something she had almost never heard in it. In all the years. Fear. Listen to me, Mija. This is not a photograph anymore. Men who leave notes like this in a room your father built with his own hands do not do it to frighten you off a hobby. Where are you right now, exactly? Tell me the street corner. Ash and Linden. I was coming to you. You will not come to me. There are 9 cameras and a boy on my mailbox, and at least one man who did not come for a story. I can tell the difference. 30 years I can tell the difference. If you walk into that, you will be the stalker on tomorrow's front page, and there will be no film left to say otherwise. A rustle, a door, the sounds of the street muffling, as if Marisol had stepped into the back. They have the roll. Do you understand what that means? Whatever was on it, whatever you photographed on that street without knowing, it is in their hands now, and they have told you the terms. Stop looking, and you are a girl who took a lucky picture. Keep looking, and you are a problem. Wren stood on the corner of Ash and Linden, with the noon heat coming up off the pavement in white waves, and the whole city carrying her photograph past her on its way to lunch. And she thought about the roll of film, and about the man on that street she had never seen, and about a woman named Eleanor behind a green door who thought her boy had been locked out in the rain. "They don't have all of it," Wren said slowly. Marisol went quiet. "What did you say?" "The roll." Wren pressed the heel of her hand to her breastbone, to the newsprint crease, to the cheap phone and the soft cards sitting in her pocket like two answers to the same question. They took the strip off the line. The negatives. "But I scanned the best frame on the flatbed last night. To send to Dev, you saw me. And I made 3 more prints of the Rain Man before I left. And the contact sheet." Her breath was coming fast now, and it wasn't only fear anymore. It was the old feeling, the darkroom feeling, cause and effect holding fast in a world where nothing else did. "Marisol, I made a contact sheet. The whole roll, all 36 frames, printed down small on one sheet so I could choose. I do it every time. Dad taught me. You never cut a strip till you've seen the whole sheet." She was already turning, already moving, away from the shop, away from the cameras, toward the one place in the city no one would think to look. It's not in the darkroom. It never was. It's in the flat file under the front counter with all the others, filed under the date. Because that's where it goes. Because he taught me to put things back. Wren. Marisol's voice was very low. "If that is true, if there is a sheet with that man's face on it, whoever he is, then you are holding the only copy of the thing they broke into my shop to take. Do you understand me? You are the last person alive who can see who was really on that street. And they think they already have it. Then I need to get to it before they count the frames and realize 36 negatives don't add up to what they saw me scan." Wren stopped at the mouth of an alley, out of the flow of the sidewalk, her back to the warm brick, exactly as a man had stood with his back to the brick in the rain 12 hours and a whole lifetime ago. Her hand went to her pocket. Tio's card, soft at the corners, the cheap phone with 1 number in it. "Marisol, is there any way into the shop that isn't the front door?" The city roared quietly around her, indifferent, enormous, the service stair off the loading dock in the back. Marisol said at last unwillingly, "The door sticks. You have to lift it on the hinge. Your father used to swear at it." Then, sharper, "But you are not going to walk into a building that men have already broken into once today, alone, on the word of a note that promised worse if you kept looking. Tell me you are not." Wren looked down at the 2 things in her hand. The lawyer who did not lie because he was afraid of Marisol. The billionaire who had said, "Give it to none of them yet. Let me be the one thing in your morning that isn't deciding for you." And under the plane trees, in the white noon heat, 4 blocks from her father's darkroom, and everything in it, Wren Callahan understood that whichever hand she reached for, she would be trusting a stranger, with the only proof that she was not the woman the whole city had already decided she was, and that the moment she went through that sticking door on the loading dock, there would be no walking back out of it into the small, safe, anonymous life she had woken up in that morning. "No," she said quietly, into the phone, to the person she trusted most in the world. "I'm not going to promise you that." And she pushed off the warm brick and went to find a way in. The loading dock behind the shop was a slot of shade between 2 buildings, and it smelled of warm asphalt and the sweet rot of cardboard left out in the heat, and of the storm water still draining somewhere under the pavement in a low, steady gurgle she felt more than heard. The service door was the dull color of an old bruise, set low behind a stack of flattened boxes. And Wren remembered it now the way you remember a song you didn't know you'd learned. Her father hauling paper through it on delivery mornings, cursing the hinge with the same 3 patient words every time. She got her fingers into the gap and lifted, and the door came up off its dropped hinge with a shriek of metal that seemed loud enough to bring the whole street around the corner. She froze. Out front, muffled by 3 rooms and a curtain, the crowd noise went on. A man's raised voice, a laugh, the electronic chirp of a dozen phones held up at once. No one came. She breathed. She went in. The back of the shop was dark and close and wrong. Someone had been through it the way weather goes through an open window, not searching so much as announcing. The trays from the darkroom sat overturned on the concrete, and the fixer had run out across the floor in a long chemical sheet that caught what little light there was, and the reek of it stung the back of her throat, sharp as a struck match. The clothesline where the strip had hung swung empty, its little wooden pins scattered like teeth. She did not stop to grieve the room. She went past it, through the curtain, its brass rings hissing on the rod, past the big copier still ticking faintly as it cooled, to the front counter, where the light from the street lay in bright bars through the blinds, and the shapes of the reporters moved back and forth across them, like fish in a lit tank. She dropped to her knees behind the counter, out of the light. The flat file was there, where it had always been, 4 wide shallow drawers of grey steel, each one labelled in her father's square hand, and then, later, in hers. She pulled the third drawer by its cold recessed handle, and it rolled out on its runners with a sound like a held breath let go, and inside were the contact sheets, filed by date, hundreds of them, every roll she had shot in this shop for a year, a paper record of a whole grieving summer laid flat in the dark. Her fingers found last night's. The date in pencil in the corner. She slid it out, a single glossy sheet, 36 little windows on the world, printed down so small each one, was no bigger than a postage stamp, and she knelt there on the concrete behind the counter, with the reporters' shadows sliding over her, and she could not, in that light, see a single thing on it. "You will need the loop," said a voice above her, dry as August, which is where you left it, because in one respect at least your father raised you properly. Wren's heart came up into her mouth. Marisol stood at the end of the counter in the gloom, her reading glasses down her nose, a paper cup of the too sweet tea in one hand, as though it were any Tuesday in the world. She must have come through the same sticking door. She looked at the ruined back room once, and her jaw set, and she looked away from it, and that was the only grief she allowed herself. "You came in the back," Wren whispered. "It is my shop. I am permitted." Marisol crouched down beside her, with the groan of a woman who had been on her feet since 6, and now proposed to hide behind a counter besides. She set the tea on the floor and drew from her apron pocket the small black loop on its cord, the folding magnifier that had been Wren's father's, and pressed it into her hand. "The vultures will not come in the back for another 10 minutes. They are enjoying the front too much. Reggie is telling them he is your manager." A thin sound that in a better hour would have been a laugh. "Look at your sheet. Mia, quickly, before either of us has time to be sensible." Wren set the loop to the sheet and bent until the little window filled her whole eye. The frames swam up one by one, tiny and perfect. The fruit vendor rolling down his shutter. The couple sharing one raincoat, laughing at the sky. The pigeon on its ledge. And there, 3 frames before the man in the rain, when she had swung the camera idly across the street to catch the amber wash of the streetlight on the wet, there, under the awning of the shuttered pharmacy directly opposite the green door, stood a shape she had never once noticed, because she had not been looking for it. A man, not sheltering, waiting, and in his hands, braced on a folded tripod against the pharmacy's dark window, a camera with a lens as long as her forearm, aimed across the street at the mouth of the alley, where 90 seconds later, Julian Thorne would come and stand in the rain and touch a wall. "There's someone there," Wren breathed. "Marisol, there's a man. He was already there. He was set up and waiting before Julian ever came." Her thumb moved the loop a frame further, and her breath stopped. And he lowered the lens. "Look." The next frame, he heard something, or the rain let up, and he lifted his head. She turned the sheet a fraction. I caught his face, clear as morning. I caught the whole of his face. Marisol took the loop and looked, and was quiet for a long moment, and when she straightened her mouth was a hard, flat line. "Then that," she said, "is the man who was paid." And this little sheet of paper is the only place in the world his face and that street exist together. Because the negatives are gone, and he does not know a girl 3 doors down was photographing the light. She folded the loop shut. Which means you now hold the one thing that turns you from the hunter into the witness. And every person who wants you to be the hunter will want this sheet to stop existing. She looked at Ren over the glasses. So, you have found it. Now comes the harder question, and I cannot answer it for you. Whose hands do you put it in? Out front the bell over the door jangled, and a new voice rose. Reggie's, cheerful, obstructing. And someone said the word warrant, and someone else laughed, and a phone's shutter chittered against the glass. Ren looked down at the 2 things she had carried all morning against the small warmth of her father's card. The lawyer who did wills and slip and falls, and would not lie, because he feared Marisol. The billionaire who had said, in a room with no photographs, give it to none of them yet. Let me be the one thing in your morning that isn't deciding for you. You told me, Ren said slowly, that men like him say all the right true things, and every one of them is exactly true, and none of them tells you what he wants. She pressed the contact sheet flat to her chest, over the newsprint crease, over her heart. But I saw what he wants, Marisol. I saw it through a viewfinder in the rain before I knew his name. He wants to stand under a window where nobody can see him and know the light is on and someone good is inside. Her voice steadied. A man who breaks into your father's darkroom leaves a note. A man who's afraid the truth will get out doesn't put a phone in your pocket and beg you not to give the film to the police. She stood, keeping low, the sheet a shield. Halloran, or whoever paid, he wants me silent. Julian wants me to look. Those aren't the same want. I know which one I trust. Halloran, Marisol repeated. Who is Halloran? I don't know yet. Ren was already moving toward the back, toward the sticking door and the slot of shade. But I think Julian will know that face the second he sees it. And I think that's exactly what somebody spent a great deal of money to make sure never happened. She got the cheap phone out of her father's jacket, the plain one with a single number in it, and she stepped into the gurgling shade of the loading dock, and she pressed the one number there was to press. He answered on the first ring, as though he had been holding the phone in his hand. I have it, Ren said, before he could speak. Not the negatives. They took those. But there's a contact sheet, the whole roll, printed small, filed under the counter where they never thought to look. And there's a man on it, Julian, under the pharmacy awning across from the green door. Set up and waiting with a long lens before you ever came. And I caught his face. There was a silence on the line, but it was not the listening silence of that morning. It was the silence of a man who has been holding his breath for 15 years and has just felt the first give in the wall. Say the face, Julian said, very low. Describe it to me. Everything you can see. Middle-aged, heavy through the shoulders, a grey beard, close, a canvas jacket with a strap across the chest, a camera bag strap. And on the strap, a laminated tag, the kind you clip on. I can't read it. It's too small even under the loop, but it's the kind press wear. Or corporate security. His voice had gone flat and certain. Don't move. Where are you? Behind the shop. Julian, there's another thing. In the frame after, he'd turned his head to speak to somebody. There's a car at the curb behind him. A town car, the door open, and a man leaning down out of it to talk to him. Older, silver hair. Good coat, even in the rain. She swallowed. He didn't send a fixer and stay home. He came to watch it happen. The line was quiet for the length of one breath. Gareth Halloran, Julian said, and it was not a question, and it was not surprise, and that was the most frightening thing of all, that he had known it might be, and had hoped, in whatever narrow room he kept his hopes, that it would not. My vice-chairman. The man who has sat across a table from me for 9 years, telling me the company needs a chairman who cannot be moved, a sound that was almost a laugh and had nothing of humor in it. He came to watch a stranger buy the one thing that could move me. Miss Callahan. Wren, listen to me very carefully now, because the next hour decides all of it. Do not take that sheet to a lawyer. Do not take it to a newspaper. Not even your friend Dev. Not yet. Bring it to me. And bring yourself. And I will send a car that no one knows. No cars, Wren said. I told you, I'll come. But I come my own way, and I keep the sheet in my own hand until I'm standing in front of you, and if I see one grey suit I don't like the look of, I walk. Those are the terms. You said the choice was mine, all of it. This is me choosing. Another silence. And then, quietly, with something in it she had not heard from him before, not the evenness, not the tiredness, but a kind of raw and reluctant respect, as though she had reached through the phone and set a hand flat against his chest, Julian Thorne said. All right, come your own way. I'll be at the house. And Wren, thank you for using the phone. She ended the call and stood a moment in the gurgling shade with the sun a white blade at the mouth of the alley, and then she folded the contact sheet once, carefully, into the inner pocket of her father's jacket, and went out the far end of the loading dock into a service lane the reporters didn't know existed, and made her own way across the waking city with the last true copy of the truth, against her ribs. She did not take the black car, and she did not take a bus. She took the long green artery of the park, on foot, where the plane trees threw shade thick as water, and the joggers and the strollers and the old men at their chess had never heard her name, and she came to the walled house from the far side, on foot, dusty and sweating in her father's out-of-season jacket, and she rang the bell at the pedestrian gate like a delivery. Cole opened it himself. He did not ask for the sheet. He looked at her a moment, and something in his careful face had changed since the study, the blankness gone, replaced by something almost like apology, and he said only, "This way." He's not in the study. He's in the room with the marks on the walls. She followed him back through the cool lily-scented dark, and it was passing the half-open door of a smaller room off the corridor that she saw it, and stopped, without meaning to, one step past the gap. Diane Marsh stood alone at the window of a little morning room, her back to the door, and she did not know she was seen. The tablet that had been her weapon lay face down on a side table, abandoned. She had taken off the butter-colored jacket. It hung over a chair. In one hand she held her phone, lowered, forgotten, and with the other she was pressing 2 fingers flat against the glass of the window, as though to hold herself up by it. Her polished head bowed. Her shoulders, those squared, expensive, unbreakable shoulders, gone soft and round with something that in any other woman Wren would have called defeat. On the side table, beside the abandoned tablet, lay a single sheet of paper, and even from the corridor Wren could see it was the same email printout Julian had. The wire, the too many zeros. Diane had been staring at it. The woman who ran damage had been standing alone in a small, bright room, holding herself up by a window pane, looking at proof that she had spent her morning defending the wrong man. Wren stepped back from the door. She did not go in. She went on down the corridor after Cole, and she said nothing, and she carried what she had seen the way you carry a coal, carefully, not yet knowing what it would light. The room with the marks on the walls was the study, and Julian was standing when she came in, and he crossed the whole length of it before she was through the door. "Show me," he said. She took the sheet from her jacket and laid it flat on the polished desk, over the drafted release that still sat there, waiting for a signature it would never get, and she gave him the loop, and he bent over the little window she pointed to, this man who owned newspapers, and looked at the face under the pharmacy awning, and then at the frame beyond it, the town car, the silver-haired man leaning out into the rain. He was very still for a long time. When he straightened, his face had gone to something beyond anger, into a cold, clear grief. 9 years, he said quietly. He held my mother's memory in his hand. He stopped, corrected himself, gently, for accuracy, Because he was a man who chose each word like a stone in a river. The woman who was a mother to me. He found the one door in the city I could not afford to have opened, and he paid a man to photograph me kneeling at it so that he could sit across a boardroom table and tell me, without ever raising his voice, that he owned me. He set the loop down. And he would have. In 3 days, at Thursday's board meeting, he'd have moved the vote. Unsound governance. A compromised chairman with a secret on Corliss Street. His eyes came up to hers. Except that the night before his man could deliver the photograph in private, a woman under a flower shop awning gave it to the whole world for free and turned his weapon into wallpaper. He hired someone to take my privacy. You took it first and burned it, and now there is nothing left for him to threaten me with. Which is why they broke into the shop, Wren said. Not to threaten me. To count the frames. To make sure there wasn't a picture of his man on the street. There wasn't. On the roll. Julian looked down at the sheet. There was one on a scrap of paper he didn't know existed. The study door opened without a knock for the second time in Wren's short acquaintance with the house, and Diane Marsh came in, jacket back on, armor back on, but her face was not the face from the corridor, and it was not the face from the morning either. She stopped when she saw the contact sheet on the desk. She looked at it a long moment. Then she looked at Wren, and for once there was nothing priced or dismissed in the glance at all. He used my tool, Diane said. Not to Wren, to Julian. Her voice was steady, and it cost her the steadiness. The scrubber. The service we use to place items we don't want attributed. The stalker tip that went to the courier at 4 this morning, it went through my system, with my credentials, from a terminal in my own department. I spent 3 hours certain one of my people had been careless, or bought. A breath. It was Halloran. He has had access since the spring reorganization. I approved it myself, because he told me he wanted oversight of crisis communications. Her mouth twisted. He wanted a back door into the one tool that could make a girl a villain before breakfast. He used me to write the story that hid him. She turned to Wren then, fully, and it was plainly the hardest thing she had done in years. I called you a stalker in a room, and I was wrong, and being wrong is not something I do, so I find I am not very good at this part. She drew herself up. I apologize, Miss Callahan. To your face. It will be in writing by tonight, and it will be public. Diane, Julian began. Let me finish this properly, or I won't get through it. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes on Wren, as though Wren were the harder audience, which perhaps she was. The clean version this morning was to bury her and protect the company. I built it. I believed it. And a clean version built on a lie is exactly the ground Halloran has been standing on for 9 years, so I don't get to stand on it too and call myself the good one. She reached into her portfolio and took out a single folded page and set it on the desk beside the contact sheet, and Wren saw, upside down, a letterhead and a short paragraph, and a signature line already signed. That is my resignation. It's dated today. You can accept it after Thursday, when I have finished taking Gareth Halloran's arrangement apart in front of the board with my own hands, because I made the mess with my own tool, and I will not hand the cleaning to anyone else. Her voice thinned, just once, to the woman at the window. I have protected this family for 15 years by deciding what the picture meant. I would like, once, before I go, to let a picture simply be true. The room was very quiet. Somewhere in the garden the wood pigeon called into the heat. Wren looked at the signed page on the desk, and at the woman who had put it there, and thought of the 2 fingers pressed flat to the window pane in the little bright room. Don't resign, Wren said. Diane's eyebrow rose the old precise degree, purely from habit. You said you spent 15 years deciding what pictures meant, Wren went on. So decide this one right. Stay, and spend the next 15 making sure the true version is the one that gets out. That's harder than leaving. Leaving's clean. You said clean was the problem. She surprised herself. Her voice had gone gentle. My father used to say, a good picture gives a person back to themselves. Maybe a good communications director does too, once in her life. Diane looked at her for a long, unreadable moment. Then she picked the resignation letter back up off the desk, folded it once more, and put it away. And if her hand was not quite steady, no one in the room was ungracious enough to notice. "Thursday," she said to Julian, briskly, the armor seamless again, but something underneath it changed for good. "You'll want to be in the room. And you'll want to decide, before then, how much of Corliss Street you're willing to say out loud. Because I can protect a great deal. But I cannot protect a secret you are no longer certain you want to keep." She was already moving to the door, tablet under her arm. She paused at it and looked back at Wren one final time. "For the record, Miss Callahan, the photograph is not the story of a girl who hunted a great man, the ghost of something almost warm. It's the story of the only person who saw him. I should have led with that. I'm rather good at leading with things. I'll do better." And she was gone. Thursday came in hot and blue, the kind of high summer morning that makes the whole city look newly minted, and the board of Thorn Media met on the 40th floor of a glass tower with the river laid out below it like poured light, and Wren Callahan was not in the room. She was where she belonged, which was outside it, at the window of a cafe across the plaza with a cup of coffee going cold, and her father's camera in her lap, and Marisol beside her working steadily through a plate of pastries on the principle that someone in the family ought to enjoy the man's money. Julian had asked her to come up. She had told him no. "It's your room," she'd said. "Some rooms a person has to walk into by themselves," and he had looked at her the way he had in the study, and had not argued, and had gone up alone into the glass to do the hardest thing. She learned most of it later, in pieces, the way you assemble a roll you weren't there to shoot. How Diane had laid it out for the board in a flat, merciless quarter of an hour. The wire, the shell company, the freelancer's face, the scrubber, the ready-made talking points timed to break before a stranger's name was even public. How Halloran had risen, silver and smooth, and begun to speak of a compromised chairman and a woman on Corliss Street, exactly as he had rehearsed for 9 years, and how Julian had let him finish. Every word, the way you let a man walk all the way out onto the ice. And then Julian had stood, and had not defended himself, which was the one move Halloran had no counter for, because his entire strategy depended on the secret being worth hiding. "You're right," Julian had said, into the glass room to the 12 faces around the table. "There is a woman on Corliss Street. Her name is Eleanor. She raised me when there was no one else who would, and she is not well. And I go to her window on the 12th of every month and stand in the street so as not to frighten her. And I have hidden it for 15 years. Because I believed a chairman who could be seen to love something could be moved by anyone who found the string." He had set his hands flat on the table. Gareth found the string. He was right about the string. He was only wrong about what happens when you pull it in front of everyone at once. "It doesn't move me. It just tells you all, finally, who I am." A pause, even and clear. "So here is your compromised chairman, entirely compromised, in the open, where no one can ever threaten to expose him again, because there is nothing left to expose. Vote however you like, but you'll be voting on a man you can see." They had not removed him. They had removed Halloran, quietly, with lawyers, in the grey bloodless language of transferred shares and accepted resignations, the only kind of ending men like that ever suffer, which is to become a line item in someone else's clean version. And Julian Thorne had walked out of the glass room the most exposed and least movable man in the city, and had taken the elevator down 40 floors, and had crossed the hot plaza in the blue noon light to a cafe where a photographer sat with a cold coffee and her father's camera in her lap, and had stopped in front of her table with the sun full on his tired face, and no coat and no rain to soften him, and nothing any more to hide. Marisol looked up at him over her glasses, assessed him head to foot with 30 years of practice, took a slow bite of pastry, and said, "You look terrible," and gathered her handbag, and left them the table, because she was, among her other talents, a woman who knew precisely when a room needed one fewer person in it. Julian sat down across from Ren in Marisol's warm chair. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Out on the plaza, a fountain threw up its bright ropes of water, and the pigeons walked their self-important circuits, and somewhere a vendor's cart smelled of hot sugar and cinnamon on the summer air. And through the caf window the light lay across the table between them, and Ren found she was holding her camera the way she had held it under the awning. Not to lift it, just to have her father near. "You didn't sign her," Ren said finally. "Diane, you didn't sign me. You went up there and you gave the whole city the one thing you'd spent your life keeping. I gave it to 12 people in a room. The city already had the better version." He turned a coffee spoon a quarter turn on the saucer, that small, stilled motion, giving his hands something to do. "You made mine, and I only had to stop lying about it." He looked up. "There's a cost. There'll be a statement this afternoon. The true one, who Eleanor is, why I stand in the rain. All of it, in my own words, so that no one can ever sell it in a worse shape than the truth. Her privacy for 11 years, bought with 4 false names, spent in a single page, because it was the only way to make her safe forever, instead of safe until the next Halloran." His jaw moved. "It's the most expensive thing I've ever bought, and the first one I've been glad to pay for. I wanted you to hear me say the price out loud. You of all people. You should know what a picture costs the person in it." "I do," Ren said softly. "I've spent all week learning." He was quiet. Then, with the careful precision of a man crossing a river he has never crossed before, he said, "I owe you an apology, and I want to say it correctly, because I've watched 2 people do it well this week, and I'm out of practice." He set the spoon down. "I had a person find out everything about your life in 11 minutes, and I told you about it as though it were a gift, to show you how clever we are, we people who own the knowing of things. It wasn't a gift. It was the exact thing that's been done to me for 15 years, and I did it to you before lunch on the worst morning of your life, and called it protection. I'm sorry, Ren, not the company's sorry. Mine, the named thing hung in the summer air between them, and neither of them reached for the larger word that stood behind it, because it did not need reaching for. It was in the cold coffee, and the tired face, and the camera held like a hand. You know what the strange part is? Ren said, and she was smiling now, a little wet-eyed, entirely wrong for the gravity of it, and exactly right. The tabloid asked what Julian Thorne was praying for. 4-inch letters. Whole city guessing. She wiped her eye with the heel of her hand, and the answer was just that the light would stay on, and someone good would be inside. That's it. That's the whole scandal. You were the least mysterious man in America standing in the rain, and nobody could see it, because they were all looking at the money. You saw it. I looked, she said, and it was the second time she'd given him that, and this time it was the whole of everything. He almost smiled. Then, and she would remember this as the moment, more than any later one, he did. It came all the way up, unpracticed and startled, transforming the tired face into something a good deal younger and entirely undefended, and he said, dry as anything, with the ghost of a man learning a language late, "Well, if you're going to keep photographing me, I should warn you my rate for standing in the rain has gone up considerably since Tuesday." Ren laughed out loud, the sound cracking bright across the little calf, and it was the first joke she had ever heard him make, and she reacted to it exactly as the novelty deserved, which was helplessly. "There it is," she said. "There's the Rain Man. I was starting to think I'd photographed the only expression you owned. Rain Man." He tried the words as though tasting them. "Is that what you called the file? At midnight? When you were proud of it?" "It's what I called you before I knew you were worth 100,000 doorsteps. I liked being the Rain Man better," Julian said. He didn't have to give a statement at 2 o'clock, and there it was between them already, the small private shorthand, the thing that would outlast the newspapers, a name from a midnight file, given back changed. The statement went out at 2. It did not read like a company's statement. It read like a man's. Because it was. And by evening the city that had spent a day and a night deciding Wren Callahan was a hunter began, in the slow tidal way of cities, to decide something else, that she was the one who had seen him true. The photograph did not vanish. It hung, in the end, in a small gallery on Vernon Street 3 blocks from the print shop, a single print at museum size, in a plain frame, and the placard beside it did not say Billionaire, and did not say Scandal. It said, in Wren's own words, only this: a man, on a summer night, standing where someone he loved could not be frightened. Photographer, W. Callahan, and under it, smaller, because Marisol had insisted, and because it was true, for my father, who taught me that a good picture gives a person back to themselves. Eleanor never saw the newspapers again. On her good days now, and there were more of them, that autumn, than the doctors had promised, she sat by the 3rd-floor window in the sun, and sometimes a young woman with a soft old camera and a quiet way of moving came and sat with her, and showed her prints of the garden, the roses gone over, the light on the wall, and never once lifted the camera at her, only kept it near the way you keep a hand. And sometimes, on the good days, a tall, tired man came in through the front of the building, instead of standing under the window, and Eleanor was not frightened by the stranger in her sitting room, because he was not any more a stranger keeping a secret. He was only a man who had come home, in through the green door, in the daylight, where anyone could see. "You came in," Eleanor said to him once, wondering, on a gold October afternoon, patting the chair beside her. "You weren't locked out after all." "No," Julian said, and took her hand, and it was Wren, in the doorway with the light behind her, who caught the whole of it, the ache turned all the way over into its other face, which had been there in the first photograph all along, waiting for someone to develop it. "I wasn't locked out. I just took the long way around. I'm here now." She did not photograph it. Some pictures a person keeps in the only darkroom that never fails. And on a warm night the following July, a year to the week from the storm that started it, Wren Callahan stood under the awning of the flower shop on Corliss Street, open again now, its buckets full of summer stock, the air heavy with stargazer and wet green stems, and watched the rain come down warm the way it only does in July. The window on the 3rd floor was lit, and a man came up the street with no coat worth ruining, and stood beside her under the awning instead of alone in the downpour, and took her hand, and neither of them lifted a camera, because there was no one left they needed to give anyone back to. They had done that already. They had done it for each other. Marisol says, Wren murmured, watching the rain silver the streetlight, that a photograph is only ever an accusation or a gift, and never anything in between. And which was ours? She thought about it, the whole impossible year of it, the doorsteps and the glass room, and the green door standing open in the daylight. "Both," she said. "I think the best ones always are." And the rain came down warm, and the light stayed on, and someone good was inside, and for once in his guarded life, the man in the photograph had nothing left to hide, and nowhere he would rather be than exactly, visibly, here. If this story warmed you the way the best ones do, stay a while with us here at Platinum Diaries, where every week we bring you another tale of quiet courage, unexpected love, and the moment someone is finally, truly seen. Subscribe, and let the light stay on. We'll be right here, waiting to tell you the next one.